So we're looking at portfolio management and overview. So if you have a background in finance, you're going to find this reading extremely easy because it essentially discusses concepts that you might be using in day-to-day life. Stuff like what is a hedge fund or what is an ETF. But if you're learning finance for the first time, I think it's a useful reading because it will help you get acquainted with different terminology. So this reading is divided into 5 learning outcomes. The first learning outcome essentially discusses about what is this portfolio approach towards investment. Then we will look at different type of investors. My guess is for the exam, this is something that you might want to revise and be careful with. Then we will learn defined contribution and defined benefit. Now this section will also be repeated one more time when you go to FRA. So because the fact that it is repeated multiple times, higher possibility of being tested again. Then what are the steps in portfolio management process, and finally we would look at mutual funds and different type of pooled investment products. Okay, so let's get started. First learning outcome, which is the portfolio approach of investing. Now see, it works like this. Imagine we have security A. Now you wish to analyze security A based on what is the risk and what is the return characteristics of security A. If you're doing this, then you're using an individual perspective. You're not looking at things from a portfolio management perspective. What modern portfolio recommends is, imagine you already have a portfolio. Your portfolio is made of XYZ assets. Okay. Now when security A gets added to your portfolio, then how is that going to affect the risk and return characteristics of the entire portfolio? Okay, this is the criteria based on which decision should be taken, and this is what they refer to as the portfolio perspective as against the individual security perspective. Now the whole theory started in 1950s when Professor Harry Markowitz, who happens to be a Nobel laureate, started this theory on the portfolio management. So he was the first one who said that. So before him, John William Burr and a lot of other professors had done a lot of work on security selection, but none of the professors had done significant work on the portfolio perspective of investment. So he was the one who came up with ideas like efficient frontier and how to optimize your portfolio. So we will see that much more in detail in the subsequent readings. Then 1960, some of the other professors individually took his work forward. Okay, so Trainer, Sharp, Mosin and Lintner, and then these guys developed what we call today as the modern portfolio theory. Okay, now the essence of modern portfolio theory, and again what is something that you might want to remember for the exams, that risk and return now are to be seen as a linear function. Okay, now this was kind of the breakthrough. Now what do I mean by linear? It means if your risk is 2, let's say your returns are 4. If your risk is 3, your returns might get 6. Now you've converted that relationship into a linear function, and that's what is the essence of modern portfolio theory. Another sentence we should be looking at is, unless the return of risky asset, okay, so look at this one, unless the return of risky asset are perfectly correlated, there are going to be a benefit of diversification. So what does it mean? It means you have a portfolio made of XYZ and you're considering of adding an asset A. So the question you would want to ask yourself is, what is going to be the correlation of asset A? So correlation we typically denote with R. So what is going to be the correlation of asset A with XYZ? And as long as that correlation is not positive 1, okay, so it might be 0.9, 0.8, 0, minus 0.7. As long as it is not exactly 1, that means as long as it is not perfectly correlated, we are going to have certain benefits of diversification. The next point in the same learning outcome, they discuss this ratio called diversification ratio. Now what they say here is, let us say you have a portfolio made of let us say 30 securities. Okay, So what you can do is you can find out what is the standard deviation of an equally weighted portfolio. So standard deviation of an equally weighted portfolio. Now equally weighted means if you have 30 security, then weight of each of the security is going to be 3.33%, equal proportion. This divided by the standard deviation of any one single security at random. So out of this 30, you select one of them randomly, and then you would say standard deviation of that single security. Alright, this is your diversification ratio, and the idea here is that you would always expect standard deviation of equally weighted portfolio to be relatively lower than that single security, and that gives you an idea of what is the benefit of diversification. Now something that I would remember for the exam is that imagine you have security A, B, C, D, okay, and each of them have their variances. Variance is the square of standard deviation. You make a portfolio out of them. So you create a portfolio which is A plus C, B plus C plus D, and you try to create a equally weighted portfolio. Alright. So what the mathematics tells us, and we would see that in subsequent readings, that the standard deviation of this portfolio or variance of this portfolio will have less to do with average variance. Okay, it will have less to do with the average of the variance of these securities. It will have more to do with the average covariance. Are we okay? So as the number of securities in a portfolio increase in a equal weighted portfolio, the variance of that equal weighted portfolio will have less to do with the variance of individual security, and it will have more to do with the average covariance of those securities. Remember this stuff for the exams. Now towards the end in this learning outcome, CFA curriculum discusses about what happens to this correlation during the financial crisis. Okay, so what was observed in 2008, that the correlation between the asset classes increased. Okay, what it essentially means is when equities were falling, alternatives also fell and bond markets also fell, and because correlation increased, the benefit of diversification decreases. Okay, and that's the point here, that during the period of financial crisis, the benefit of diversification is going to be not as much as in the regular period. Alright, so next learning outcome now. So again, from the exam perspective, there are a lot of small theory points that we need to remember here. So we would be looking at different type of investors. So individual investors, so these are people like you and me. We will have different risk and return requirements. Then institutional investors, one of them is endowment. Okay, so mostly associated with universities. And how these funds work is that there is a lump sum contribution made. So imagine you have assets under management of 30 billion, and every year you've been able to generate about 10% returns, and then these $3 billion are being used for running the operations of that particular university or for specific purpose of that university. Okay, so typically the lifespan of these endowment funds is perpetuity. That means you would want to keep the value of this 30 billion intact so that it keeps on generating you certain cash flow for the specified objective of the endowment. Then foundations, just think of them as charitable organizations. Okay, so foundations specifically made for, let's say, some providing medical help or providing some other type of services. So think of them as non-profit organizations. Then insurance company, again we will divide them into property and casualty insurers or life insurance companies. Then investment companies including mutual funds, sovereign wealth funds, these are the funds of the governments. So there are very popular funds from the Middle East. We know that there is a Abu Dhabi sovereign fund and Kuwait sovereign fund, and these funds invest into different type of asset classes. Now this is the table from where we can expect some sort of a questions on the exam. Okay, so we will use a granular approach, do them one by one. Let us look at individuals now. So risk tolerance of the individual, this depends because there might be certain individuals who will have higher ability and willingness, and some of them will have lesser. Investment horizon depends, liquidity needs depends, and income needs depends. Okay, which means on the exam you're not doing a question on this. Then endowments. So endowments, again, as I said, typically attached to universities, very long term horizon. Perpetuity is the typical horizon, and then they try to generate some cash flow to take care of the spending requirement. So risk tolerance high because the horizon of investment is substantially longer, so they can afford to take risk. Investment horizon long, liquidity needs low. Okay, so it is not that they have some committed payoff and they have to make the payments. Okay, therefore low liquidity needs. And income needs is a function of what are the spending levels which are assigned to that particular endowment fund. Then banks. So banks, risk tolerance low. What is the business model of the bank? To collect deposits from let's say people like you and me, and then consolidate those deposits and give them out in the form of loan. On a very broader level, this is the business model. So they cannot afford to take risk. So risk tolerance low. Investment horizon short, because it might happen that the depositors will go to the bank to withdraw their money. Liquidity needs is always higher, and income needs is a function of what is the interest that they have to pay on the deposits that they have taken. Mutual funds now. So mutual funds, risk tolerance depends depending on what type of mutual fund. Horizon depends, liquidity needs high or depends, and income needs again depends. So again, which means you're not doing a question on the exam on mutual funds. Then defined benefit pension plans. What are these? So when an employee joins you, you promise him that once you retire, till the time you're alive, every year we will pay you some X amount based on some formula. So now, right from day zero, when your employee joins you, you start keeping aside certain funds to take care of this liability in future, and then those assets or plan assets are called defined benefit pension plan assets. So what is the risk tolerance? High. Why? Because you're looking at, when an employee joins you, you're looking at a time horizon of 25-30 years before you actually start making payments. Investment horizon very long. Liquidity needs, if the plan is young means your employee, there's a lot of time left for your employee to retire, then you don't have to worry about making cash payments, so liquidity payments are low. And again, income needs is a function of what is the rate at which your liability is growing. And the last one now, insurance. So risk tolerance low. Investment horizon, if it's a life insurance, long, but if it's other insurance, then short. Liquidity needs higher, and income needs are going to be lower. Okay, so this is a summary. Make sure you remember this stuff for the exams.